Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to another installment of the Talented Learning monthly webinar, today co-produced with Authentic Learning Labs, who will talk a lot more about. Today's title is Bridging the Learning Analytics Gap and How Guided Insights Can Lead to Better Results. And we've got quite the information-packed webinar and illustrative webinar for you today. So thanks for logging in from all over the world. This will be a 60-minute session. Please ask questions in the question pane. I'll thread the questions in during the presentation if it's relevant and on topic and something that we can address. If not, we'll follow up individually afterwards. We're also going to have a series of polls, and it's really interesting today because of the cross-section of the audience and of the presentation to participate in the polls so that we can start getting some good data as we talk about data. If you're attending this for CAE credit, if that means something to you, just email me, John Lay, at talentedlearning.com after the session, and we'll send you your certificate for the live session. So our agenda for today on bridging the learning analytics gap is we're going to dig deep into the concept of data analytics and how it can apply to learning environments, and more specifically, how it can apply to extended enterprise learning environments. And through real-world scenarios, we're going to talk about defining analytics. What are the top challenges? What's at stake for not doing it or not doing it well? What's the role of data visualization in this whole process? What does that mean? And we'll help you visualize that with some examples of our own. And then we'll also talk about building the business case for analytics in your organization. So that's a lot to get to, but we're all prepared to do this motley crew right here will be your two presenters, or at least I'll speak for myself of being motley. I'm John Lay. I'm the CEO and lead analyst of Talented Learning. Talented Learning is a fiercely independent learning technology research and consulting organization. We study the learning market. I've been studying analytics and the term prior to that, reporting, in learning management systems now for almost 20 years. And so can't wait to show you today what's different and evolved. And with me to do that is probably one of the world-renowned experts here in learning technology and extended enterprise, continuing education. My frequent presenter, as it turns out, I went back and counted, Tamer Ali. We've been together now 6 times. I think this is our 7th presentation over the years. So welcome back to the webinar series, and give you a chance to go ahead and introduce yourself and your organization.
Thank you, John. It's an honor. It's mine, and appreciate the kind words. Authentic Labs is really honored to present today. We're really trying to focus. A long time ago, there was a company that used to say that we didn't create anything, but we tried to make things better. We're doing that in the learning and training and talent development industry by coming in and hopefully plugging in complementary technologies and services that will improve what organizations already have and made investments in learning technology, human capital management, and we want to make those technologies better, work better, and maybe more efficient, more impactful. Authentic Analytics is one of the first products that we've developed. It's an award-winning suite. Essentially, it's business visualizations explicitly and focused for learning and development. So we didn't obviously create business visualizations. We didn't create analytics, but this is a suite dedicated for learning and training and talent development. So it has specific functionality, the vocabulary, and the focus is specifically for the space. And you know, it's why we're here today, and really want to show that you know, our experience for working with this industry and supporting this tool and platform. Back to you, John.
All right, thanks, Tamer. And most of you know Talented Learning, I would imagine, but if not, we've been around now for 5 years. We're independent analysts. We have a weekly blog and monthly podcasts and webinars and premium content. We cover about 200 now vendors in the learning technology space of all stripes and flavors, and we consolidate all the information of what these organizations or vendor technology solutions can do, and we try to synthesize that for the market and and share our research for you in a free and often way for anybody that wants to be serious followers of the learning technology industry. As our day job, we help typically LMS or learning system buyers buy better by helping them define their requirements and then leading them to the right shortlist recommendations in the marketplace, as well as conducting a professional buying process. But let's get started here on audience poll number one. Everybody, please jump in here. We'll pull up this poll. Go ahead, Tamer. We'll get you going here. There we go.
So I think the quick question here to start it for everybody else, and to get a level set, is how do you analyze right now the learning behaviors and impact of your organization programs? And there's some choices there to select from. And we'll wait for everybody's choice, and then we'll display it. Thank you, John.
Sure. So it could be basic. Love to see how many people are bringing in other data. That's one of the real neat things that's happening is the combination of other business systems and using the data together. Some organizations are playing with dashboards and getting some useful visualizations, and probably just a few organizations are highly advanced here where they're using this as predictive model, at least based on our experience. We'll go ahead and close that and show it, and let's see if it's what we expect. And I think it is a pretty good indication. 52% I think is actually pretty low for based on my experience, Tamer, because so many LMSs just have the course progress, if nothing else, the basics of course progress and completion reporting. And so most organizations are really stuck with that to try to do their analyzation.
Yeah, I agree, John. And this is one of the biggest challenges we see in the market is, it's almost self-serving, is that we, as learning practitioners, we must shift to a higher level if we're going to quantify our impact. Otherwise, someone in the boardrooms will ultimately say, what real impact are you providing? That's the challenge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's hide that. It is neat, though, to see that all but 20% are fairly advanced with data integration and custom dashboards. That's pretty cool. I'm glad to see that. All right, let's get going into the meat. So we're going to start at the beginning, and then we'll build up, and it'll all make sense in the end. But what is data analytics, and why are we talking about that anyway? And why is that different than reporting? And who has time to crunch all these numbers or create custom reports or pay a vendor to create custom reports? These are probably all questions that some of the audience may have, but analytics is really important. And it all starts with a process that aims to simplify complex data so you can uncover valuable business insights. And it's really the whole reason that learning systems or learning management systems were conceived in the first place almost 30 years ago to gather this data and provide organizations with a true insight into the compliance, as it were, of their organization. But there's really three types of analytics. There's the descriptive analytics, which is what happened, and that's what we're all used to. Who took the training, who's in progress in the training, who started it but didn't complete it, who's overdoing the training. Those are the typical things that you would see in LMS reporting. It's that descriptive level of analytics. But where the power starts to come in analytics, and what wasn't available even a few short years ago, is the ability to do predictive and prescriptive analytics. What could happen? So using the past data to make predictions, one, to understand the past, but then to make predictions for the future, and then even alter the business approach of your organization so that you can maximize what you're predicting, so that it can actually come true. And that's where the power of analytics. And a lot of times with employee learning systems, this is all around learning efficacy, but with extended enterprise, it turns out it's a lot more. It's about moving your business needle, of having channel partners sell more, or customers ramping up onboarding faster, and providing the different types of user personas with what they need to be successful, which it makes your business successful in the whole learning process, and that all comes with analytics. But what exactly is learning analytics, Tamer? As we dig down even further, learning analytics as opposed to just analytics.
Yeah, I love the quote that borrow from a peer and an expert in the industry in analytics. And he works with many organizations, large, global organizations, small. And Garrett Calkins, and I try to put his LinkedIn profile there. Is he puts it very clearly: is that analytics is beyond what we typically call business intelligence. It's really taking the data and simplifying it and making it into a way that we can understand and build insights from it. So what we typically call, and what we see, people use ad hoc reporting, or I want to get into my data so I can put it into Microsoft Access, or even now, the tools are out there, and I think we're going to be asking that, Tableau or Microsoft Dynamics. These tools are out there. However, what they're trying to do is to simplify that review of data, and especially large volumes of data. It's a time in history where we can do that relatively easily and cost effectively. And why we're doing it in learning is probably what people have always told us is if you can't measure something, you really don't have a process, you really don't have a method. It's really, you're just doing something, and somewhat ad hoc. And so by applying this practice to our profession, we're really formalizing our impact and our approaches. So we need to go beyond what we typically go into an organization. They have what we call in industry surveys or smile sheets, right? At the end of the course, you say what you think of it. And some of that may be mandated, but what's the challenge with that is it's really not measuring any impact. And we have all these models we talk about in education, whether it's Kirkpatrick or others, but we're really not practicing an actual common and consistent method of measuring. Seeing how things are going, and for us, if we can't, then what is an actual profession doing then in that regard? So it's substantiating our existence, really.
And we've been talking about it. We've been talking about it since the day I entered the industry, 20 plus years ago, of how to prove your existence and your worth. And in internal employees, it's always been really challenging because you can train your employees, but it's real hard to draw that result line to the bottom line. Training your leaders more seems like a logical thing, but can you assign a dollar value to predict a dollar value of how your organization will perform better or do something different in the future because of that? That becomes a lot harder, and as a result, it becomes really hard, as a matter of fact. As a result, a lot of organizations just left that behind. But with, as it turns out, with the extended enterprise, it's all about that measurement and to analyze what's happening so that you can make adjustments and compete better in the marketplace using training as a strategic tool. And so we're starved. The price of light is less than the cost of darkness, for sure. And so there's lots of data out there, but organizations aren't using it. And maybe it seems difficult to process that or come up with a strategy to process it. And it's easy to ignore it and just continue on as business as usual. But there's a lot at stake now because progressive organizations are using learning and analytics together to make a difference in their business. And that makes them more competitive in the industry or whatever their industry is. It's a strategic tool. And so if your organization ignores it or is not doing it or is not doing it well, you may not see it. That may not manifest itself yesterday or today, but you'll see that competitive gap grow over time. And that's why you should care. Whether you choose to ignore it or not, it's not going to go away. And that's what's at stake. So let's look at another poll and just see a lot of, we had the whole spread there from 50% just using basic data all the way to 20% using, there we go, that's launched, using fairly sophisticated data analytics inside their organization. What about this? What's the biggest challenge that your organization has with analytics? Is it lack of useful data? Is lack of expertise? That seems to be a big one. Just who do you get to do that in your organization? So you have Tableau or you have other type of analytic tool, but you got to get time from somebody. You got to figure out, build it as a project. It's getting that expertise is hard. That level of expertise just doesn't come out in the street very easily with most people's skill set, and that's probably an opportunity in itself, Tamer. Weak tools, all of the above. Weak tools or all of the above, and we got some others. So let's go ahead and close that and share the results.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about
all
that?
The above. Yeah.
All of the above. Weak tools, lack of data, lack of expertise. You stack all that up, you're like, maybe we should tackle this next week.
Well, I mean, what's the saying is, if you can't measure it, you can't really improve it. And this is a challenge for us. And we can see that some people do have, it's a higher number that have the actual tools. It's just a focus issue, right? To do it right, it's more than just having someone for free for 8 hours to develop a report. That can be done, but for consistency and building a practice, that's hard. And I think that's why it's indicative of this these results.
Yeah, the difference between like reporting and analytics is, think of reporting as what you have to do to submit your to submit something up the ladder to your executives, where analytics is taking that data and then acting on it. Is a good difference. And I think without that useful data or the experience of the weak tools, organizations are much more in that reactive, send it up the ladder with analytics versus doing anything additional with the data than what they're being asked for.
For sure.
All right. So what are the top challenges, Tamer? This is your wheelhouse. So go ahead and tell us all of them.
Yeah, unfortunately, we see results similar to what we saw in the survey poll results, and in large to small organizations, and we have a scattering of the different types and sizes and across industries. We see common symptoms. The biggest one is they're not focused. They don't have a dedicated resource. They may even have the tools. In many places, they've subscribed to 2 years, 3 years licenses to a very good tool like Tableau or Microsoft's product, Power BI. I made a mistake earlier, but it's Power BI.
Right.
And these tools are out there and they're installed locally in the organizations that we serve. And they're just sitting there because they're not being used by a dedicated resource. And so in many cases, we see that where it's just something that nobody has had dedicated interest in. And I'm surprised because usually someone has to justify the software purchase in the first place. And they're quite expensive. The other side is the access issues of these tools are tied to, usually the license fees are tied to how many people get to use them. So they're by the nature of the software licenses, they are prohibitive of growth. Meaning, if John, you and I had an organization called Acme Co, and we wanted to give it to all the stakeholders, let's say there's 10 executives that we want to give access to, then we have to pay for those executives in some way in these software licenses, which sometimes makes it prohibitive. You don't want to give it away because then I'm going to have to pay more. Whereas it kind of behooves us to give access to data to show what's happening, but then you're hesitant to do that because it'll cost you more to do so. So these are the catch-22s that we see, and then obviously the lack of access to data and expertise, lower on the totem pole of issues and symptoms that we see, but they're also a problem. And so the all you can eat comment of all the above is probably very indicative of what we see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting why our industry was one of the first with reporting and to really make that mandated inside of learning and development. Yet we seem in a lot of ways to be laggards in terms of AI and advanced analytics in the world now. It's almost like everybody raced by and we're catching up right now.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. So if you have challenges, here, let me get this pull up first. Go ahead and read that, Tamer, while I pull this up.
Sure. Yeah. Well, if the groups that you, well, did I lose you there? Oh, okay. Sorry.
Sorry.
How effective is your learning program? If you're doing the analytics now, how would you rate it? Is it effective, ineffective, really effective? and be curious on why,
Yeah.
if you are other in the answer pane as well.
Mm-hmm. So I guess not effective at all is, we have reporting, maybe it's not really what
Yeah.
we need.
It's not telling us anything.
Reasonably effective means you can check the box and send your reports up, perhaps. And highly effective is, are you using that data to make a difference? And that is the big question. All right, we'll do give a couple more seconds here. Do speed polling. All right, so we'll go ahead and share that. I guess that's why we have all these people, attendees, because we don't have any highly effective, but we want people want to be highly effective, of course. And so after today, we'll go ahead and show. So thanks for participating in these polls and just helping us take a sense of where everybody's at. And so it seems like we have a nice diversity of the audience today. And as we go through the second half of the presentation here, we'll get in a lot deeper here on what this actually looks like or can look like. But it's not just us or the people on this line. There's a lot of experts that have been commenting and writing and studying the analytics inside the learning space for a lot of years. And on a survey from previous year or so ago, only 10% of learning professionals said their analytics are very effective to address time-sensitive business requirements. So we got a total of 0 on our poll, Tamer. So, it seems like it's in line and maybe not even changing. And I believe that in the review of all the learning systems that I see, I'm rarely wowed with the analytics. I mean, there's some good stuff. I mean, you can run reports, and some of the better systems may allow you to do some ad hoc reporting or pulling from, any fields and trying to give you that capability. But when you get that capability, what you do with it is difficult to figure out. In a lot of cases, you got so much power to create stuff, but once again, you lack that expertise to do it. And there's the data integration challenges.
Yeah, it is discouraging, and we see the same thing as in the landscape of providers. We don't see someone that's really dedicated to provide that, and the challenges that you're presenting right there are symptomatic of what we see.
Mm-hmm. So lack of integrated systems, and so what would be the integrated systems that we're talking about? So learning data is one thing, but what are the other integrated systems that you would see, Tamer? That's the
CRM and analytics are key. It's anything in the life cycle of the participant that would be relevant to the whole picture. And really, what we're talking about is storytelling, and how do we tell the stories with all the perspectives and the storylines. So CRM, where this person comes from, commerce, or if this is an education organization or a publisher that's selling. If they're more advanced, they're doing learning experience or XAPI, and then anything that's in the learning platform itself, the LMS, and then maybe some things that are happening in external systems like event management, session evaluations, and things that happen in a large, if they're an organization like Oracle or Apple that do live conferencing, those events can feed into an overall picture of participation. It doesn't have to be just e-learning, and I think that's a limitation of what people are dealing with now. Is they have score completions, and they think that that's it, and really that's just really a notch, like you said, of someone completing, but it doesn't give you a picture of anything really.
Mm-hmm.
So that's compliance more than anything else.
So if you can get those score completions and then compare that with customer satisfaction data or sales data or channel data, and to see trends between completion or interaction with that course, or time spent, or scores with that course, with actual performance in terms of how, say, was your salespeople, you're measuring how big a sale, how many days in the sales cycle, how many complementary products were part of the sales solution. all those things can be measured, and combine that data with the actual training completion or any type of training analytics, and that's where the power starts to manifest itself.
Yeah, I completely agree, John. I think it's a lot of orchestration, and people immediately go to IT for reporting, but the orchestration and the understanding of the perspective and what data really matters should be probably done by the education team and the analyst and people who are really developing and managing the education. And if you don't have that skill set, then that's something that you should supplement the team with. But someone who understands that, a Zendesk helps support team software can give us valuable insights on if the training for reps is working, or like you said, Salesforce for the CRM data that's saying that the new sales training is working, and if idle sales activity leads to poor performance in courses, or vice versa. So knowing that, and not just taking someone from IT and plucking them out of their role unfairly, and expecting some immediate vision on what's going on, is not the right approach.
It's kind of, there's really the two different roles. There's the strategic role, and then there's the knocking it out technically and making it happen role. And they're almost two, or they are two different roles, or they probably could be combined in the same person in some cases. And I think it's almost similar to, from a content standpoint, the instructional designer versus the programmer that's just putting it together after it's already designed and laid out from a conceptual standpoint. That you really need both of those to make the impact. And if you just toss it over the fence to IT, you might get some really cool graphics, but without that strategy part, it's often not tied to actual impact in your organization without the strategy. But so say you do get all the data, and now you got all this data, and we're all in this boat sometimes where this is great. I'm like that with my marketing automation software. It's like, great, I got all automated. Now I have so much, I don't know what to do with it. It just, I'm collecting it. Maybe someday somebody would figure that out for me, but I don't know what to do with it. And I think that's what, where the role of visualization comes in.
Yeah, I agree with John. And it goes back to storytelling and answering questions. What are the business questions that we're trying to answer? This is not about, we can make charts pretty, right? But it's not about making charts pretty alone. We do like aesthetics like everybody else. It's about making those visualizations make sense and tell a story, so that you don't have to leaf through what you're seeing on the screen. This is 10,000, 20,000 rows of data that could be told in a much shorter and concise way, and not lessen the impact whatsoever. I think if we go to the next story, I think you'll see that very clearly. And this one, I'm old enough to remember this. In 1986, it was a cold winter day in January, but it's in Florida, so you don't really think about cold in January in Florida, because it's when people go there and visit. But there was a tragedy that happened that day in January, and that was the Challenger explosion. I remember it because I think it was the first space shuttle explosion. And a lot of people don't know this. Those people who do remember this day, is that it could have been completely avoided. And we often say that we're not doing anything, it's life and death. But this in particular, the story actually pointed to the life and death value of information design and visualization. What you see there right beside the Challenger is the actual diagram that the rocket, the engineers had actually developed. They knew there was a problem before the actual launch day. And in those rockets that you see, there's actually, it looks like a box of crayons. Those marks on the rockets that you see in the little squiggly black, and this is the actual visual diagram, so it's been magnified, so it's a lower resolution quality. There are rings around the rocket that hold the rocket together. And those rings suffer damage in certain conditions, and the engineers knew that, and they tried to disclose that in this type of diagram. So this is their diagram: the number of attempts that they took, and the damage in those joints. But for a novice or even an expert looking at this, it doesn't really convey a story. So after the explosion and the tragedy that happened, there was a commission that was put together And it was led by one of the experts in the field, Dr. Edward Tufte. That if you look up his name, he's considered the Leonardo da Vinci of data. He writes books on just the design of information and the efficacy of design of information. And he put together this diagram, and it's essentially just two planes. It's what you learned in math and when we were learning, plotting X and Y coordinates. Basically, the horizontal graph, the X coordinate is temperature, so temperature outside, and the Y coordinate, where you would go, left up from south to north, would be the number of damaged rings, and that we saw in the previous diagram. And all he did was take that same data and chart it in this way. And what you can see is, if you can just take where that red X is what temperature it was on that day in January, the 28th of January, 1986, it was 31 degrees. And if you could just see what kind of damage you could have expected with the number of O-rings, you would have already seen that in warmer temperatures, you saw that kind of damage. What kind of damage you would have seen 30 degrees colder. And so this is all you had to tell with the story. And you could have been very concise. Apparently the rocket science, the engineers, they were throwing down books of information cautioning Cape Canaveral not to launch, but they couldn't convey this one succinct story. So this could have been totally avoided. And Edward Tufte is famous for these types of visualizations and succinctly describing information. This is one. And we always like to bring this up as the importance of information design. Now, some of you might be working in professions where this could have been, it could ring true. Like if you're an engineer, you're working in healthcare, information design could be a life and death. Equally important in some regards. So we'll go to the next. Thought we could give you some examples of how we're visualizing things, and for us we're still in the storytelling business. So Authentic Learning Labs has created an analytics capability to show you the hows, the whys, what's happening, why it's happening, and also kind of predict. And if you, Jen, if I can trouble you to go to the next slide, what we're seeing is what we call the health dashboard, and we're trying to tell stories. It's kind of hard sometimes to show you the real software because we have to show you real data and real clients. So this is anonymous, but real client data. And what I just did with the cursor there is to go over 4 or 5 curves and then switch that same information to bar graphs. So telling stories in different ways with different charting techniques is one way of doing it. And also in this dashboard, you can see that in plain English, we're trying to convey information and signups, completions. A very simplified health dashboard, what we call, which is really just to show how it's going. How is my program going across a certain range of time? In this case, it was 30 days, I believe, and then how much activity is happening and who's doing it. And then on the next slide, we take another view, a set of time. In this case, we switch to a dark mode that helps some people look at it differently. We like that light and dark mode. A different time segment, and as you can see, those peaks and valleys are there, which John's highlighting there, and what the enrollments are. But this is, what we can ask of our marketing team. What happened on those days that those 4 peaks happened, and what can we do to recreate those times? And can I see this in a different way? Can I look at it in areas so I can see it a little bit better? These are all things that are indicative, and we're trying to summarize that data by showing you comparative data of the previous leading 30 days. So, how am I doing in comparison can also be answered. And on the next slide, what you'll see, and I'm trying to go through these very quickly so we don't, abuse time, but essentially taking this information and saying, what was the effects? Did we repeat this slide? I think. Sorry, John.
Uh-oh.
Or I might have been.
There we go.
So you can see another time range, and this is, a longer time segment. So the data looks a little bit more busy. But what can I do to make this data better is format it in a different time segment and/or different charting technique. So, visualization tools can do that. So a bar chart may be more valuable. A line chart can even show you very clearly the trend. It's down. So you can see things differently. And this is a huge amount of data. As you can see, 30,000 enrollments,
Wow.
19,000 completions. So we did that in a few seconds in a, a screen of, a page size screen, instead of thousands of rows of data, which, you can count right there, 30,000, almost 31,000 rows.
Wow.
So storytelling, very succinct, almost Cliff Notes version of storytelling. In this case, we saw an assessment. Again, look at the number of learners, 25,000 participants. So you can imagine how many test rows of data. So the data is very voluminous. It's hard to even say it. And you can see what we're trying to do on the top is summarize some of that activity. How many learners, how much time was spent with their first attempt and last attempt, and how much impact was done between there, where they went off and took a sales training course and then they did better. And we're trying to show you performance across each question. So each one of those questions is showing performance. And you can see that one that really did worse than anyone scored 23. I didn't have to go through 25,000 records to see that question number, whatever that is, did the worst. This looks like question 6. Did the worst out of that range of questions, and there's 20 questions or 64 questions, and I can leaf through the other ones. So a very quick snapshot. So I love these types of graphs because it gives the person who's interpreting it a lot more time to focus on the conditions and the whys versus putting it all together, which is the hows. I mean, the labor of all this is not really what we want to spend time on doing. So, hopefully, visualizations are leveraged or such things. And then the artificial intelligence is doing things like, scanning this information and categorizing it and making sense of it and doing some of the heavy lifting.
Wow.
So the next page, I think you'll see that, we're going to ask some questions on, what other questions you can ask. And I'll defer to John to start this one.
Yeah, cool. That's some neat visualizations that you're pulling together, and it's really it's amazing. I've been for example, test item analysis. That's been a learning management system requirement for a dog's age of organizations that can compare either pre and post tests and doing exactly what you're trying to do right there of determining the efficacy of any given test assessment question. But it's so hard. That data goes, I mean, that's a common theme of today. That data just goes unused in many cases because, you just get so many rows of data that you can't see the pattern. You can't see the forest through the trees, or it's easy to get that saying wrong too. So, but if that's the wrong way to say it, but it really is hard to see the actual trends and then act on them, even if you have the ability to collect all test assessments or evaluation questions or poll responses, for that matter. So the questions to explore as a result are really wide and varied, and as it turns out, like most things, tied directly to your business and your business case. And some things that are really important in extended enterprises, how should we profile our target audiences? Are our target audiences what we think they are? Our user personas, our learner personas, what we think we are. What we're finding out in the industry is more nuanced than just having one type of user or a couple different roles of learners in the extended enterprise. It could be a combination of the profile as well as training history and performance on the job to allow them to get into a new group that perhaps you market to separately, that you try to put people into that, matching like with like to find higher performers or high performers, by using that data, and then creating separate and sub-target audiences. So it can get very specific, especially in extended enterprise and targeting the different types of organizational or individual users. And that rolls down to make all your decisions. And, what should our content priorities be? How should we author or create that content? And, the duration, the bite size, how we put it together, the journeys, does it have the impact? Do we have event? Many associations are running an extended enterprise, running live events, webcasts, and webinars, and live events, and not doing anything with that data. A lot of times, barely even tracking, who attended that, and just pushing it out. So these are all questions that are out there that, if you have the data to back up at any one of them, is going to be able to translate that into metrics or translate it into measurable impact in your business. And so how to outline how that works, translating questions into metrics, how would you go about that, Tamer?
Yeah, this comes up a lot as, okay, great. It sounds great, it looks great, but how do we start? And, we typically recommend a few simple steps. It's really just to start with the questions that you want to answer. And it could be one question. Like the very simple one is, how is a particular program doing? And then how do we define that? And so what is impact and quality? And those could be like some of the ones you mentioned, John. I mean, the simple ones, enrollments and completions, but then you dive into satisfaction scores, possibly performance on the job or in the field, time to complete and the aggregate time and the grade. These are all perspectives, and so you're turning on the lights in a room, each one providing a little bit more of an angle to the performance. And then the question is then, where is that data? As you start asking those questions and pointing out what we call is the impact and these metrics and how we're going to measure them is the next question, where are they? And then putting that into a simple diagram, you can put that into even Excel and chart it. So none of these tools are doing anything differently per se on the surface level that a simple approach couldn't take for a sample. And that's really what we typically recommend, is just put one line of it together and see how it is, and then determine how to operationalize that. Where would that come from consistently? Who would pull it, and how often, and who needs to get it? These are questions, and as you mature, then that would necessitate more advanced tools and services, and maybe even a dedicated resource, which is very important.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right. Well, here's our fourth and last poll. Let me get that one launched here. There we go. So what would you want to achieve with deeper insights audience? To clarify the needs and behaviors of your various audience segments, pinpoint most or least effective content for continuous improvement, understand the strengths and weaknesses in your learning experience. That's hard. I always think to look in the mirror and see your weaknesses of the content that you're developing. All of the above, other. Go ahead and enter that into the question pane, and we'll shout out some of those if there are. Give it a couple more seconds. Any predictions, Tamer?
I'm probably bad at this, but I would say the choice C, understand strengths and weaknesses in learning experience.
All right. Oh, it changed right at the last second. Right at the last second. It was 38-38. It slid to 41, but
I did not vote, so it's not what me to. I don't have a vote.
You didn't sway it. So, yeah. but look at that, pretty close. So, pinpoint the most and least effective content and understand the strengths and weaknesses of the content is two sides of the same coin. And certainly, how would you do it without this? Generally it's anecdotal. You can certainly collect the data, but if you don't, force the collection of it, a lot of times people won't say it. You could have really terrible content and not know it for years, especially if you're not trying to find that out. And so to automate that process and continually highlight when something's weak so that you can shore it up is, what all learning organizations should be constantly doing. All right. Go ahead and click to the next one here. I'll let you introduce this, but I like this chart, especially around NFL draft time. It makes me college football player.
Yeah, the spidergram has worked a lot, and this may look overwhelming at first and very technical, but it's very simple. As say, if you had to evaluate anything like a person or a team, or maybe your favorite movie, and try to categorize, it's 5 categories of information that was important to you. In this case, this client, these are 5 categories that were important for them into surveying their audience. And so the performance of the audience was charted in this diagram. So the blue triangle or trapezoid or whatever that shape is, it starts to shape based on the aggregated performance in enrollments and completions or whatever we define as those categories. So let's say, in this particular example, hypothetically, because we have to protect the client, is that, the number of completions and scores in a particular category that's tagged for communication skills. And you can see that would make the shape fill out in that direction. So if there were more courses that were taken in basic, or performance was well in basic or leadership skills, the shape would then update and push out in that direction. So the question is, what would look the best is obviously the one where the shape is completely full with blue. But as you can see, it's kind of lopsided. It's only one side that's really strong, which is the communications, where the learner growth is marked and there's gaps. Those are places where the learning needs to improve. So instead of looking at 6 categories or 5 categories here, leadership skills down to communications, you're looking at it in a chart that's trying to summarize all that information in this gram. And John mentioned sports. They use this in sports to analyze individual performance and capabilities, like measurables, like someone who has really good hands but doesn't have the speed. So the hands would be strong on the left where communications is, but on the right you would have his speed category or her speed category, and it would be lacking. So that an evaluator can look at many performance metrics very quickly, whether it's an athlete or an education program or a financial program. You could look at it in this way.
So there you go. Pro athletes have been using AI and data analytics forever.
A long time, yeah. Learn from them too.
Doing it forever. How about this example?
This was another one where was a challenge that was brought to us. It was not an existing dashboard or an approach that we had, but we knew, that this was a need in the marketplace, when the organization came to us with event data, and they wanted to correlate that with their learning platform data. And so we brought together what you would see is in the top was their yearly conference data in the event session performance and attendance and evaluation. So, many of you may go to a conference, whether it's Macworld or something in Las Vegas where they have conferences, or DC or one of these major venues, Chicago. And when you attend them, usually there's some kind of event technology that manages it, knows that you attended or you say you attended, and then you may take us the evaluation. That data is rich data that a lot of people don't mine as effectively, and they don't also correlate it with any other kind of platform needs. So we took that data, our team took that data and put it together and categorized those participants and did further analysis. And the following screens, you'll see some of the things that we did. I think next slide, if you would, John. Thanks. One is we used artificial intelligence to categorize the feedback, green being positive, red being negative, gray being neutral, and yellow being, and these are color coded just to help the presentation, but mixed feedback. So we were able to take and categorize all of the feedback, and you're looking at thousands of rows of feedback. We categorized for them. So they knew general sentiment. And then on the next slide, what we did was to show that in visual charts and pie graphs, so you could see, this is dummied data, so we protect the client and the innocent. So you can see the feedback there by participant in green, and you can see the overall feedback was, this was also mocked up, so you can't see the real information. But you can see how, and then we can escape this and go to another. And these are all.
That's really cool.
That's really. It's purposely that we've used software to obfuscate the text there.
Hey, before you move on, how is it smart enough to analyze that sentiment?
This is where the artificial intelligence is. So we're going back to the slides about what analytics does is different than just dumping business intelligence data. Is the real intelligence is to say, okay, what is this information? How can we categorize it better, and how can we use machines to do a little bit of our work so that we can spend our time in analyzing it in a different way? And so the artificial intelligence, and we use various techniques of artificial intelligence to scan response data, performance data, and then we use that in a combination of ways to categorize it. And then we refine it because you need to refine it like any engine to make it, understand that when someone says nothing, this was a great meeting, that is not negative, it is positive. But if you would see no or nothing on something else, it might be, so context is also measured in artificial intelligence, and tone, exclamation marks don't always mean bad things. Also mixing, like, I had a great session, but your speaker was politically biased, so that's mixed. But sometimes machines can get confused. The good news is we still have a job. Human beings still have to look through this stuff. The other good news, there's no bad news. The good news is we can do less work on the lifting of data and spending more of it, like understanding some of the context of the stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, we still have a job for now, anyway.
We do have, for a while, yeah.
Sure. Oop, here, one too far. There
and
you
then
go.
you can see that this is further is using visualization again. We can also show what session attendance without, for an executive, telling them that you have 20 rows of categories of sessions from like real estate basics to advanced selling of LEED certified buildings. Those can be like somewhat mind-numbing, and executives might scan through it quickly. Here you can say, like this, the size of these circles mean how many people attended sessions in that category. And so it's another way of looking at the data that might be more appealing, more effective in telling that story. And if we go back to this, the shuttle Challenger example is telling a story in a way that conveys information more efficiently and effectively.
Mm-hmm. Wow, excellent, excellent. All right, so building your business case for learning analytics. So, what's the how do you go about that? It's really just to start simple and be strategic, like in all things. You don't want to boil the whole ocean. You want to start with a piece and grow it and measure the effectiveness of it. And so, as we've been saying, pick that question. What's that question that you want to answer and solve? Is it about the content, the efficacy, the event questions? Find that data and combine the sources. Develop the relevant metrics. Chart it. Even starting with a small piece, as you said, and tie it to the business measurement or business metrics. Most importantly, on your business case, and then expand based on your success or failures. Both are good to analyze, and then shore up on that next round of revisions. And this building your business case goes also towards building your business case for actually purchasing and investing in learning analytics also in your organization. So, being able to sell that up the ladder on why it's important, why you want to layer this level of technical and professional expertise, and what it's going to get the organization in terms of being able to predict other things. And so you have unfortunately, the opportunity or the challenge of having a double business case to build. One, to put it in place so that you operationally can use analytics and have the tools to use analytics, and then actually using that then to for all the different parts of your learning business. So it's quite the challenge, but certainly not insurmountable, as we see every other industry surmounting it pretty easily. So, Bridget, we've covered a lot of ground here, Tamer. Thanks so much for sharing your expertise. We talked about speed, we talked about integration, we talked about translating the lots and lots of rows of data into something useful. We talked about how artificial intelligence and machine learning is helping process and find data and trends that we just wouldn't be able to do looking through tons of it. We talked about visualization. We use visuals to show visualization, and the proven process of starting small and working through measurable success as a way to move forward, and really the help that you need from a professional service expertise, either as augmented staff or a combination of strategist and the heavy lifters to help take this data and get it into that usable form, whether that's inside your organization or outside. So we had hopefully a really good conversation and helpful for you to show you the difference between learning and analytics and how that's evolved and how organizations are using it in a practical way on an everyday basis. Thanks very much for attending. After this, we'll send you an email link to the on-demand version if you want to share that with some of your colleagues. You can reach Tamer or myself at these email addresses: tamer@authenticlearninglabs.com or John Lay at talentedlearning.com. If you have follow-up questions and or requests or feedback, or if you want to see more from Tamer's standpoint of examples and so forth, I'm sure he'd be happy to guide you there. Once again, if you want to receive that CIE credit, reach out to me directly. And thanks very much, Tamer, for joining me again for the 7th time. As we continue to dig deeper and deeper into learning technology. Audience, awesome, Tamer. Audience, thanks again for taking a whole hour. Have a great day, and we'll see you next month.